Welcome to the Pan-African Lifestyle Show, the ultimate Pan-African hub for celebrating our heritage, culture, and global impact. I'm your host, Marcia Levy, and today we're diving into the journey of a dynamic changemaker who has redefined entrepreneurship, media, and innovation across continents. So how are you today? You doing good?
I'm brilliant. Yeah, I'm very good. Everything's plugging. Yeah, very happy. Very happy. How are you?
I'm great. I see the view behind you is beautiful.
Yeah,
I like
this
that
is
city.
this is Dubai Marina. This is my apartment.
Oh, okay. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I have our first question for you. Josh, you built a remarkable career across multiple sectors. Can you share the pivotal moments that shaped your entrepreneur journey?
Wow, that is an interesting question. I think when you take a step back, probably one of the most important things I learned, especially in hindsight, the more I thought about it and the more people I spoke to, is confidence. I think confidence, confidence to act, confidence in thinking I can do things, thinking I can do it. I think a lot of people don't actually end up starting because they lack the confidence in doing it. And I was very lucky to get that from, in the first instance, my parents. And then the second instance, I think, being involved in direct sales and marketing was so important for me in building up a good base of confidence. So by the time I left after I started that, after like 3, 4 years, I genuinely believed if I could just do anything, if I just learned from the best people, applied what they taught me, to a T, and then added my own, flavor to it on the predication of my personality, my experiences. I was like, that's the best way to be. And it's the same concept we follow now as a company. And that if you can, diversity is not like this thing where it's some kind of charitable philanthropic element where you're just kind of helping people. No, I mean it brings in ones and zeros. It's something that is extremely compatible with the growth of business, development socially, development economically. It's just with everything. It's extremely powerful. Um, and that kind of mantra is what I started off with. If I can take from all these diverse minds, from all their diverse positions, and they've done what I'm trying to do before and are already at that level, how can you mess that up? It's very difficult if you have all of these mentors, that have already done what you're trying to do, and you just do exactly what they say. It's very difficult to go wrong if you have the confidence to enact it, if you're not supremely egotistical, if you're not fearful of the result, if you just do it and you apply, and you have faith and resilience. I think you can get a lot of these things done, but that's what it takes, in my opinion. And that really is a massive thing, confidence. When I talk to people that go to these kind of these red brick kind of schools in the UK or kind of like big schools in the US, the one thing that stands out is that they genuinely feel that they can do anything. They genuinely feel that they can do anything, and the teachers tell them they can do anything. That their classmates, are encouraging these things, and they support you with bringing in the best people from around the globe to talk to you every month, every week. You're just getting bombarded with all this stuff, so you leave thinking you're on top of the world, and
I
there's no
love
better
that.
education than that, right? And so that confidence, I feel, is deeply important. It doesn't matter if it's quiet confidence or loud confidence. It's just that you have to believe it, and I think that is something that was very important to me in hindsight.
Yeah, I love that. Confidence and getting started. Having enough faith in yourself to push through and, having that confidence and just pushing forward. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so the next question we have for you, sir. Starting in sales and marketing with major brands like MasterCard and Canadian Red Cross, what key lessons did you carry into your later ventures?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was very lucky to get a lot of experience in talking to people, and I was very lucky to get a lot of resilience. You know what I mean? In in face-to-face sales. You need to be very resilient, right? So I think that carried over to starting a business really well. And I was commission only. So
Mm,
I
that's
mean,
good motivator.
my first ever, roles at the age of 18 years old was commission only. I was building resilience. I had to be
Mm,
good at talking to people. I had to be good at learning, which was such a good foundation for starting a company. It was almost like it was divine. It was,
mm,
it couldn't have been better. Like it genuinely couldn't have. And so when I did start a company, I just did exactly the same things that I had learned. I got the best people. I learned from them. I started conversations with all the major broadcasters so people knew who I was. I started conversations with agencies and funders. Started conversations with talent. And that kind of mentality, the positive attitude, and all these different things that you learn, it carries over extremely well. So being in direct sales was my university, ended up being my education. So then I left that rather than being, and nothing obviously against higher education, but rather than being in debt, I had some money, like a bit of money. I wasn't in debt, and I feel like I had some education off of the back of that. And that was the era, really, kind of that late noughties, early tens era, where people started to realize that you didn't have to go to university to
mm.
succeed. That was like the first kind of era of that, when I was kind of coming out. And I think that that was really useful. And I was very lucky, honestly, to have a mother that understood that understood that there was more than one path to do things. A lot
Yeah.
of parents are like, no, you have to do this, you have to be this, and I was very lucky that she would just say, no, you just have to push out and do something. I don't know what it is, but you have to push out and do something and go from there. So I was
So
very,
you
very
avoided
fortunate.
the whole debt scenario with higher education and learning that a lot of people are faced with today, having to pay back debt. So you were able to avoid that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, there's no guarantee anymore. If you do follow this path that they set out for you, and when I say they, I mean more from a public sector perspective. They set up this path of if you do these things, that you have a better chance of being successful. That is technically true, but it doesn't guarantee success, right? And that's the distinction. We have a lot of people in South Africa, for example, that are extremely intelligent, that are university educated, that are struggling to obviously find work because
Yeah.
of the current employment matrix in the country. So one of the things I've noticed that we're dealing with on the continent that we will solve is making sure that it's easier for the individual to start a company. It's
Hmm.
easier for the individual to start an SME and push out, start to get clients, be agile, be strong, and push through.
I know some
One of
that
the
some of the barriers though for people starting their own businesses is financing. How have you seen that
Yeah.
play a part in you trying to assist people with that?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, and this, I'm so glad you asked that because it's such an important element of all this. Is that you have some markets on the continent where it's like you're talking like 300 days to start a company. It's just absurd. Then you
Yeah.
have a place like Rwanda where you can get started like within the week. Like it's like, of course they're
Wow,
going to eat
yes.
people alive. It's night and day, and so you're then going to see the growth of an economy if you can empower the people that are there. And that is the most important thing: is to recognize that your people are your strength. That every single person is in a leadership position on the continent or wider is understanding that the innovative force of your people is the most important thing. And so it's key to make sure that you're applying that mindset when you are setting out your legislation, as specifically when it comes to starting business. And you're right, it can't be expensive. It has to be easy. It has to be easy to plug into the system. In the UK, you can start a company for like £15, which is what is that, like 19 US dollars. It's nothing. Then obviously, you have to obviously do some things, for accounting and all stuff, but that comes later on,
Yeah.
right? It's like that. It needs to be that easy. It
Yeah,
needs to
it
be
does.
easy for you to just hook into the system because otherwise it's just untenable. You're asking people, and that's why we have such a massive informal sector on the continent that just is completely informal. They rely on informal methodology of payment. Obviously, they're not paying tax. I don't blame. Why would you? And it's like it just doesn't make any sense. It's counterintuitive to what certain governments are trying to do. And I think that once that changes, once you make it much easier and you make it easier for people to plug into a more global exportation based market, where now the agency that we have is based in Johannesburg. Our law firm is based in Rwanda. We work with a team out of Ghana for all of our tech. Like it's very Pan African. When you see Africa as a singular market like that, what you can do is phenomenal. And so you're 100% right. It needs to be easier. The rails need to be easier, and that's what will formulate more growth.
Great. And so your transition into journalism and media was very unique. What inspired you as far as the film code, and how did you launch your career in media?
That's a good question. So I left sales and marketing, and I thought to myself, what did I want to do, and what was the kind of the thought process of my next steps. And I realized I wanted to be involved in TV. That's what excited me, right? So in the first instance, I looked at it from the performance perspective. I was interested in getting involved kind of more in front of the camera. Um, and yeah, and as that kind of, it's not that the idea necessarily changed. I think it just morphed into something else. And so when I moved back from Toronto to London, I realized, wow, I'm in a market where we have some extremely talented actors and people obviously coming out all the time. It's a very different scope to like Toronto, where I stand out dramatically, with my look and accent and feel. In London, I'm like a dime a dozen, right? And then I'm looking at some of these stories and I'm learning. I'm looking at people like Idris Elba that took so long to kind of break through. And I'm like, yikes, this is going to be a long slog. So I'm like, how can I speed this up? And so the first company I actually started was Wilson Worldwide Productions. And I started that company not really to be front facing. It was any project I was involved in that I could use it as a vehicle to collect IP for that project and put it into that company, right? But then it ended up like a couple of years later that company had been around for an amount of time now where I could get seed funding as well. And it wasn't very much. It was like £7,000. It was like a loan. But it kind of helped. And I started the Film Co as well, like a year after Wilson Worldwide, at a film company. And, it started off kind of relatively slow, and then it built up. It built up from there into to a stage where it was much easier for me to get work through branded content or things on those lines rather than through performance-based work, right? And as that built up and built up and built up, it ended up then being something where, we had proper, productions with like Sky and other broadcasters where it made more sense to focus on being an executive producer than being a performer.
Okay. Alrighty. So, as the founder of a successful TV production company, how did you navigate the competitive UK television market?
It's an interesting question. Once all your questions are interesting. I think a big part for me was finding a way to do things that was more efficient. That was the biggest key. So I partnered with a fantastic organization and entity that still exists today called Infinitum, and they basically engineered very unique ways to fund television production, specifically non-scripted television productions. So it took a lot of weight off of the broadcaster. So then the broadcaster is then just looking at the idea. They're not looking at it from the basis of funding that idea, which is what you do in the UK. We have something called terms of trade, which basically means that a television producer will keep all of the international IP for a show that they create, which is crazy. That never happens really in the United States, right? Broadcasters would take all the IP because they consider themselves paying for the show. In the UK, it's a governmental legislation for that not to happen. So ergo, a broadcaster has to really like your idea, generally you have to have a good track record and all these different things in order to cut through, right? And so we made it so it was much easier for them to make that decision because we had this funding partner, which was basically, to cut a long story short, bring agencies on board and utilize some of their marketing spend with one of their brands and use that in what we call break bumpers around the show, which was an ingenious model. So then everyone was winning. The broadcaster was getting a show basically for nothing, right? And at the same time, that'll obviously work for them. It's an idea that they liked. We were obviously, getting a large production budget, and that's something that we could obviously utilize to make the show. We then work with a prime broadcaster, growing our kind of cachet of product that we have, TV shows that we have, IP that we have, and then the funder, the brand, the agency, they get what they want as well because they get their brand. If we work with Jeep and Lucozade and a bunch of other brands, they get that on prime television, right? So everyone ends up winning, and that kind of was an important thing I think for us, was finding a way to make something work, and of course diversity as well. That was a big thing for me. Diversity helped us with figuring out different ideas, which I think helped a lot, different ways of thinking about things, different perspectives, different countries. I mean, one of the biggest show that we had was a Chinese show. It was aired on Himalaya, which is a Chinese, basically kind of a voice broadcaster, right? And yeah, that was a big project for us.
I have to say, I love the idea of everybody winning. Like, we need more of that here in the United States. Like, that's like unheard of. Like, you always have it like the people on the top and then, the actors, struggling actors and all that. So I love that idea. That's awesome. So
Yeah.
with your work, it's spanning, I'll say you have a lot of things that you're covering here. And so you've had collaborations with global giants like Disney, National Geographic, and ESPN. What has been your most rewarding project to date?
Oh, rewarding. I think it's probably, what we're doing now, I think is deeply important. Obviously now I have a venture firm. Basically, we're based out of Dubai, and we're based out of Botswana as well. And we have different operations, Johannesburg, Kigali, etc. And I think, yeah, what we're doing now, it means a lot because ultimately, we look at things on a multi-pronged approach. So multiple verticals, so media and publishing, financial services, research and policy, and infrastructure and energy. So the first thing we're focusing on right now is media and publishing. So we have the exclusive license for Billboard in Africa, Rolling Stone for the MENA region, Rob Report for Africa, and we're about to announce something really, really exciting. Another large brand that we're bringing under the umbrella as well. And so, big part of that is changing the narrative around the continent, which is deeply important, and making sure that narrative is being controlled at a better skew, that we're focusing on that. So there's so many positive stories, so many amazing things that are happening, that it's so important that's amplified. That's amplified globally in what is currently considered to be trusted brands. So whether that is music and Billboard, and making sure that we can generate more of the equity of music, something that we have pioneered. People of African descent, Africans on the continent, have pioneered every single musical genre that's in the popular form currently. Rob Report, there's so much luxury on the continent that a lot of people don't know about, that we want to bring a highlight to. And then once again, Rolling Stone from a culture perspective, whether that is in the Gulf, North Africa, etc., that's something that they're obviously doing a phenomenal job at right now. And I'm in the thick of it here in Dubai, and it's obviously extremely, extremely exciting. And these things, changing that mindset and scope, is important. We're about to launch a very, very exciting digital bank called UBX, which it's what we're doing is truly revolutionary in regards to finance, payments, remittances, and the scope around that, and how we're mixing traditional and next generation banking, and how that would be a pan African proposition, specifically with inward remittances, outward remittances, payments on the continent, and making sure there were the right rails to be convenient and efficient for people. It's very similar to what you elocuted before in regards to starting a company, startup costs, right? You can't have it. So it's unbelievably expensive to transfer money and do all these different things.
Right.
It's absurd. It's not feasible for people to be in that type of market. And these are the things that we're looking to change from a financial services standpoint. Infrastructure and energy is an obvious one. We need more energy, and we'll be growing, some of the best infrastructure I feel on the planet. Not just us. As from a continental perspective, you're going to see much more of that as time goes on. And
Yeah,
then
that's
obviously,
why a lot of people were so hopeful about cryptocurrency. And now that you're talking about this big, maybe, some kind of way that will give people a little bit more confidence in that area. What do you think about that? Like as far as cryptocurrency and including it?
yeah, I certainly, from a cryptocurrency standpoint, obviously that is a large, overbranching term that I think has been somewhat vilified from a media standpoint. So it doesn't kind of bear positive fruit anymore, because a lot of people think about some of the schemes that they've seen that have been nefarious or things on those lines, right? Those are the ones that often get headline news. But what I do genuinely believe is that stablecoin is going to be is an extremely exciting proposition. It's already an extremely exciting proposition, and the concept of having currencies that are backed by something, or that have some kind of that are stabilized ultimately by something, is something that really it could be genuinely, and we obviously think it's going to be very game changing from a continental standpoint. So the great companies that we have currently are doing great work that we've recognized, and the Flutterwaves of the world, the Yellow Cards, which are trying to really push a lot of these things forward, which is really positive. You're seeing the traction that they're getting. We can utilize stable coins to stabilize transactions. We can utilize it in wallets so that people don't have to worry about massive amounts of currency fluctuation, which a lot of African currencies are hit with. These are the things that we really care about, and that's it's a massive thing for me, in gaining more equity for the African continent. There's so much to do. There's so much innovation, and there's so much beauty, and there's such amazing people, and that is deeply, deeply exciting for me. And then building those links between the Caribbean and the continent and the Gulf, because we all have so much in common, whether that's bloodlines, whether that is culturally. These are the things that we care about. So that's what I would say.
And so, with the Diversity and Inclusion Award your company received, it's a testament to your commitment to representation. What inspired this focus, and how can others in the industry follow suit?
You know, what really blows my mind about stuff like this. Now you're going to get me started on one of my rants. See, what blows my mind when I hear these statistics that that women of African descent, African women, are like the lowest receivers of venture capital. And I'm like, is no one? That to me is a massive opportunity. When I hear that, specifically in the American market, when I know for a fact there's loads of innovators that are doing great work, that are women of African descent, I'm like, well, then I should probably be focusing on that area, shouldn't I? To
Mhm.
me, that's a massive, massive opportunity. The same, when I hear these things and then I see something so counter to it, that gets me really, really excited, and I see that by and large. And so when I champion diversity, I genuinely believe people think that it's some kind of like, something that I'm doing out of the kindness of my heart. No, it's because I see the opportunity in it.
Right. And I think a lot of people don't understand the wealth accumulation aspect of it. When you have the people who provide the opportunities to certain people to wealth build and then deny other people the opportunity to wealth build. So that's the whole thing that's kind of going on there, I feel, here in America. But with you focusing on it, you can change all that, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, listen, the most important thing for me is that people understand if you have a room of people and they all look like you and they're from the same country as you or they have the same background as you, you're just not gonna get the diverse ring of thoughts that you need. And and we used to see it all the time. We still, I'm sure we still see it now sporadically when these stupid organizations used to like put something out that was tone deaf during like Black History Month or something like that. They'd put something out and you're like, oh my gosh, is there no people that are of African descent in any of your companies that you knew that this would be ridiculous to put out? And it's not even just things like that. It's just the commercial opportunities from different communities, how to place your marketing. You're in the United States, in your example, is a market that has global appeal. It's one of the few markets that has had global appeal for a long time. I think that's becoming more, that's spreading more. That sense you can be more kind of you can have a more global strategy for many different countries now. But the US was really that country where it's like, yeah, the US brand or US company, you were really trusted, right? But like, it's very hard to penetrate markets if you have no one on your team or anywhere that's from those markets. I just find that to be absurd. We would never have been able to get a commission with a Chinese broadcaster without we had a Chinese division in our company. It just that made sense to me because we wanted to work more with China. This is the thing. It blows my mind when people have this mindset. You need to have an understanding, and obviously you're talking about it, I guess, from the wealth building standpoint, that kind of anyone can kind of plug in these things. I think that different communities are going to field different amounts of wealth growth and wealth generation, and they'll come with different ideas and paradigms to penetrate these marketplaces.
Yeah,
And that is, from an investment standpoint, that's a really exciting thing.
yeah,
I remember, and you'll probably remember this as well, in the 90s, Hollywood had this whole thing. If you were a leading male of African descent, that there was only basically a couple that could even sell films. If you
yeah,
remember, it was
yeah.
like Will Smith and Denzel.
Denzel,
Everyone else could, it was literally a thing.
Snipes. Yeah,
Couldn't sell.
yeah.
Wesley, and then you had Wesley that obviously did Blade, and there were a few people that cut, but that was really it. And then it kind of opened when kind of Black Panther came along, and it was like the entire cast was of African descent. And it became one of like the biggest films ever, and that's crazy to me. So
Yeah.
these mindsets change when they see the results as well.
I agree. And your work has reached over 8 billion viewers worldwide. How do you approach creating content that resonates across the diverse audiences?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I look at it from the perspective of what would I want to see. Sometimes one of my
Yeah.
development team used to look at it from the perspective of what they would want to see or what is currently in the zeitgeist. And we put out this promo video for the launch of Billboard Africa, and Nina Simone was talking about, we have this kind of flashback where she's talking about an artist be should be portraying and putting out what's happening in the times. Basically, I'm paraphrasing, is what
Yes.
she was saying. Um, and that's what you're supposed to do. That's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be able to look at the world and think, what should we be looking into right now? What should we be talking about? What's happening? What are people maybe not thinking about that is relevant that we should be tackling? I think that's really important, from a creative or artistic perspective. And then that generally has some kind of commercial resonance as well. With broadcasters, depending obviously how hard hitting it is. So yeah, I mean that's what oftentimes I think it's important to to be inflective, and really consider what is happening, what you would want to see. It has to be kind of personal as well. And yeah, you should be able to find some kind of North Star from that.
Yeah, I like that because a lot of times you have folks trying to kind of with the narrative, they want to control more so where things go and what we see. So I like
Mm,
the idea that you're saying, like, no, we're going to reflect what it is that we see. And then we're also going to look ahead, to think about how we might want to address things or change things. So instead of controlling the narrative, reflecting and then demonstrating like what things could be.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Entrepreneurship often is a roller coaster ride. What challenges have you faced and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, loads. I mean, challenges is part of the game, isn't it? You know what I mean? Resilience is a part of all of this. I think resilience is, with confidence, it's a necessity in this game. You know what I mean? Otherwise, you're going to get eaten alive. It's you have to be resilient, and from a challenge perspective, I mean, you name them. I think the biggest challenge that entrepreneurs face all the time is capital flow, right? I think that's ultimately the biggest underlying challenge that anyone can face is not having enough money. Not having funding, not having revenue, starting up like costs, all these things. Because ultimately, if you have loads of money, then it's about operations, and then it's about actually that's implementation. And I've learned so much along this journey. One of my favorite things now is staying lean, and cutting unnecessary costs.
Yes.
I think is deeply important to me. Sometimes I see these companies with like massive amounts of revenue that have like 10 people. And I'm like, oh God, it's just brilliant. You know what I mean? It's just great. My ideal world would be to be just to have like me and maybe like a PA, and then that's it. Obviously, if I wasn't, doing all the stuff I was doing on the continent, that would just be a dream. You don't have to take care of anything or anyone.
How is that? I don't know how that would be possible with all the things you have your hands in. Like,
It's
woo.
impossible. It's impossible. Just in this dream world I think about sometimes, but then I pull myself back down to earth. But yeah, I love lean businesses. I
Yeah.
think that yeah, as an entrepreneur, you got to be very careful with your spending.
Mm.
Very, very careful. Just because you have an amount of money, do not think that that all has to be spent. Obviously, you have to look at things from the perspective of what needs to be done. But then I think it's so important to be efficient and to work hard and oftentimes it's it's better to work smart and not to throw money at the problem. And I think sometimes a lot of people throw money at the problem, and it's just I think that's a disaster. There is only so much string, you know what I mean? And that's for everyone. When Amazon starts up a new division or a new company as part of their whole matrix, they give them like an empty office.
Mm.
They give them an empty office. They have to buy the furniture. You know what I mean? Because they see it. They want them to see it as a startup. They
Yeah.
don't want them to see it as you're part of Amazon, that you have an unlimited budget. No, you got to see it as a startup and grow it in that way.
Mm.
And it makes things so much more efficient. Because otherwise, it's just you're just throwing just cash at this problem. I think it's a disaster, and it can cost someone dearly. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. Implementation has never been a big problem for me. It's always been about, capital, managing these things, making sure that things are working efficient and flowing well.
Right. And so you made sure that you have a good financial team with working with you,
Yeah, I try to do
like
that.
advisors and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and yeah, you want to have people that the most important thing in the early stages is making sure you're bringing in cash, you're
Mm.
bringing in money, and that ends up solving 99% of problems that you have. And then if you can do that, then you're off to the races.
Okay. And so, for aspiring creatives and entrepreneurs, what advice would you give on building a global brand?
Uh, a good question. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I talked about it a bit here. The confidence and resilience elements are obviously key. Having those foundational elements are key. Finding good mentors is deeply important. Finding people that are doing already what you're trying to do, and just pestering them and just asking them as many questions as possible, learning from them as much as possible. Um, you really want to find those people. I think it's really, really key. You got to get rid of any fear or any ego that you might have because this game you really have to knuckle in. And so I think that's obviously very important as well.
So, confidence, foundation, having a great mentor.
Yeah, I think, and resilience. I mean, I can't stress that. I mean, resilience is just because you this is not going to be. When I remember hearing a UFC fighter once talk about, you know, that a lot of people go into these fights imagining them just dominating their opponent, just round upon round. And he was like, no, I like to think about what happens when he's on top of me, or when I'm being pressured, or when I'm, almost being submitted to all these different things. Everyone just imagines all these positive things always happening, but what are you going to do when you get hit? And I think that's what people really need to take into account because that will happen. It is bound to happen. It doesn't matter who it is. And you have to understand how you're going to respond to that. Another great piece of advice that I heard actually very recently is every kind of 18 to 24 hours, if you have like a clock, you know, what are your three most pressing things that you need to get done? If you're the founder and presumably the CEO of this entity, what are the three most pressing things you need to get done in that time period? Everything else can kind of wait. It's all just fugazi, right? It's all just noise. But what are the three things you need to get done that are desperate? That need to get done for you to, I don't know, whether that's ultimately for revenue, for growth, for development in that time frame, and you have to be hell bent on completing those things. That's where I like to be. That I want to be where the problems are. I want to be where there are, where there are issues, where there's log jams. That's where I want to be at. And so you have to crave that. It must be an obsession, I feel, for you in certain respects. You have to crave the problems and fixing those problems and pushing through. Um, and then you'll probably have a new set of things, 24 hours later or 2 days later, you'll have a new set of things, right? So, that's like a consistent thing you end up finding yourself doing. And the other thing is, listen, you're going to have ups and downs.
Right.
Sometimes you're going to be the hammer, sometimes you're going to be the nail,
Mhm.
but just remember the next day is a new day. So it's a reset, and to make sure you reset your day. So whether that's you going out for a run, I don't know, having a swim or whatever, heat therapy, you have to meditating, yoga, praying. You have to reset your day. It's really key. Don't let days run into each other and you start to get overwhelmed. Don't let that happen. Reset your days.
Well, Josh, you're not going to believe this, but you read my mind because I was about to ask you, I was going to follow up and ask you, what do you do when you get down? And you just answered. So, so we're coming close to the end of the show. And, finally, here at the Pan African Lifestyle, we ask every guest, how do you personally define the African dream?
I'm glad you asked. You asked some great questions today. I'm glad you asked that. I think that we were talking about this recently, and I think as a continent, we've actually done a lot of things really, really well. And it hasn't oftentimes been attributed to us, which is, these are things that will be being fixed and will be being properly attributed more and more in the future. But I think that's a big key to this is the understanding of the great things that we've done, sustainability, for example, the way that we've lived, the way that we've worked, the way that we've looked to do things has been in such a sustainable manner. And And now it's so funny that you're now seeing the global north, circle back to that and now focusing on sustainability and all these
Yeah.
different things. Africans have been the pioneers of sustainability for so long. We lead the world in female entrepreneurship. And now, all these countries are now focusing on, female entrepreneurship and all these different things. And I think that these things we have to make sure that narrative is being projected. It's important that we understand that we've looked at these things, the way we've acted. We haven't tried to go out on like these carnage sprees of starting wars and doing all these different things. It's at least in modern history, and so it's we have to remember. I think a lot of the scope um, of where we have been and where we've obviously come from, and what that means today. And I think when I think of the African dream, I think about sustainability, I think about unity, I think about efficiency, um, I think about mutual prosperity, I think about peace. Those are the things I think of, and I think that any entity that's being started needs to feed in to the growth and development of those ideals. And I think the venture space on the continent needs to make sure that we are also, taking risks and feeding into the African dream sometimes as well, rather than just consistently looking at traction, traction, traction. Traction is very important, but at the same token, it's important that we look at things as well and think, maybe it's a smaller ticket, to get someone started or something like that, but it can be supremely efficient. I mean, what Rwanda has done with Zipline is phenomenal. I think they lead the world in medical supplies distributed by drones. The
Mhm.
world, like it's no, like most people don't know this. I mean, it's just phenomenal,
Yeah.
and like per
Now that's
capita.
innovation. That's amazing.
But, but these things are happening all around the continent. I think a lot of people don't know. So I think it's important these things are projected in the right way. And I think that, the African dream really is about getting equity, in the marketplace, seeing the marketplace grow, and also the collaboration aspects of that. And that's why I'm very happy that I live in a place like Dubai where there is so much cooperation and collaboration between different peoples of different, ethnicities and races and countries, and so much togetherness and scope of growth and bringing people together. And I see that now on the continent all the time. And this is the thing. These are the things I think that will certainly separate us and really push forward a really prosperous and exciting future.
Yeah, that's very inspiring. And those ideals that you listed, yes, I I would love to see those things. Cooperation, peace, all those things. So thank you for joining us on the platform. It was such a pleasure speaking with you today and sharing some of your accomplishments with the PAL audience. Is there anything that you would like to share as we close out our conversation?
I mean, yeah, thank you very much for having me. I think, the name of this brand is Pan African Lifestyle, and I think that's the way forward, in being Pan African in your mindset, whether that is people on the continent, the diaspora, in the US, across Europe, the Caribbean, and really coming together. Unity is what has always led us to the right spaces. It's always led us to the right spaces, whether that's the UAE and uniting different peoples here to create this country, whether that in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, I'm a Jamaican citizen. Our motto is out of many, we are one. And these in America, all of the innovation, every single piece of innovation in America was done through the collaboration of multiple people from multiple backgrounds, races, nationalities, ethnicities, etc., gender. That is where we have always been strongest as a species. And from a Pan-African standpoint, if we see more Ghanaians collaborating with Angolans, if we see more Angolans collaborating with South Africans, we see more Botswanans collaborating with Namibians, if we see more exportation and importation of products across the board, if we build out the rails to make that happen, the continent is going to be one of the most exciting markets across the next 10 years that I think we've ever seen. I think the
Yeah.
growth The growth there will be unbelievable and undeniable, but it will take unity over division. And that is going to be the most important thing for our mutual growth and development.
Yeah, and I think the people want unity. You can see it. They talk more about it nowadays. So I agree. So, Mr. Wilson, thank you for sharing your incredible journey and invaluable insights with us. Your work exemplifies the power of innovation, diversity, and perseverance, inspiring us all to dream bigger and do better. To our viewers, thank you for tuning in to the Pan African Lifestyle Show. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, live the African dream.
Living a dream, living the African dream.